National Code Enforcement Network. My name is Pete Roque. I'm with Four Leaf, and today we have our guest Sharon Guidry from the city of Santa Monica. Sharon is the Code Enforcement Manager for Santa Monica, California. I've known Sharon for a number of years, somebody I've really looked up to for a number of years, and I actually had the pleasure of serving in a city next to her. And if you know Sharon, you can the city that she was. As soon as you cross a certain street, you just knew you were in her city. That's how awesome she is. She made that city sparkle. So with that, Sharon, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. As Pete said, my name is Sharon Guidry. I am the Code Enforcement Manager for the City of Santa Monica. I have been in code enforcement for 26 years, started in 1994 in the city of Linwood as a code enforcement officer, and over the years have promoted throughout the profession. I've served as a code enforcement supervisor for the city of Carson, enforcement services manager for the city of Culver City, neighborhood preservation manager for the city of Lakewood, and now code enforcement manager for the city of Santa Monica.
So in the city of Santa Monica, for you guys that don't know, it's where you see all the palm trees and all awesome looking stuff. If you ever want to see the top echelon of street performers, you go to the city of Santa Monica. I've been there myself. I've seen some awesome ones, but some of them aren't always permitted. So we'll have Sharon discuss that in a little bit. But normally, what I like to do is, just kind of get to know our guests and today. So Sharon, can you tell us how you actually got started in the code enforcement profession?
Sure. Years ago, I started in municipal government in 1990, and I worked for the city of Linwood as an admin assistant in the water division. And just around 1994, a friend of mine who also worked in the city of Linwood, he was a code enforcement officer, and in the process of being promoted to a building inspector. And so he approached me and he says, "Hey, I'm going to be promoted and my position as a code enforcement officer is going to come available. Are you interested? And if you're interested, I'll take you out on some ride-alongs and get you familiar with what we do." And so, at the time I was young. I was a mom of two, a single mom of two, and code enforcement paid a little more than what I was making as an admin assistant in the water department. And so I said, "Yeah, I'm interested." And so I went along with him on ride-alongs, and I was able to learn and understand code enforcement, and also at that time a lot about building inspection because he was going to be transitioning to a building inspector. And so when the position came open, I applied, and because I had the experience through the ride-alongs, I ranked number one and was selected. And I spent 9 years with the city of Linwood, and had an opportunity during that time to do so many things, and take on some leadership roles in the staff, and became the acting code enforcement manager even for a period of time. So I got here by a friend, and telling me about it, investing in his time in helping me understand the profession. And initially when I started, Pete, to be honest, it was really just because income wise, I needed the income. But it wasn't very long after becoming a code enforcement officer and seeing the difference that the enforcement made in the lives of people in the community, that I realized this was really much more than just earning a paycheck. And I lived in the city at the time, and so driving through when I was off on the weekends and with my kids, and seeing properties that were blighted, but with my notice of violation and working with the property owners, it had improved the quality of life for the residents who lived on the property and throughout the neighborhood. I just really started to see code enforcement and what we do in a much more impactful way.
Now, did you see when you transitioned over from the water department over to code enforcement? Were there any transferable skills that you used, and if so, what were they?
So there were some transferable skills because in the water department, I worked in water maintenance. So, where the guys, the water meter readers, the maintenance guys that repaired the water main breaks and those sorts of things, everything, water maintenance, because Linwood had its own water department, compliance with the city had 2 active water reservoirs and 7 active water wells at the time. And so the water department, our division, was responsible for inspecting those facilities, making sure they were compliant. And as the administrative person, I was responsible for ensuring that these things happen. And so, as far as complying with regulations, and then the skill set that I had developed, with keeping things on track when it comes to meeting regulatory requirements, I think that yes transferred pretty smoothly, even though I didn't really realize it at the time that I was doing it, that it would be transferable, but it certainly was.
Also, and for those folks that have their own utilities in their own jurisdictions, a lot of times that's a great way to find out property owner information. I
Yeah,
mean, water, yes, and then people don't think about that, and sometimes we have to use those resources. And you being able to say, hey, boom, hey, that person has a water account, he has a phone number, let me give him a call. It makes
exactly.
your jobs a lot easier. And so after that, you transitioned over to, you became a supervisor, correct?
Yeah, so I left Linwood in 99 actually. I started in Carson in 97, so the numbers don't add up right. I started in Carson in 97, but I actually left Linwood in 99, and I worked the 2 jobs for 2 years simultaneously, two full time jobs, 7 days a week. And also, I went to school, went back to college 3 nights a week at the time. And so I went to Carson as a code enforcement officer in 1999. And then by 2000, I was promoted to a senior code enforcement officer, and then moved to the planning division. And I spent 6 years in the planning division and learned all things land use, and I was responsible for all of the land use investigations and
Oh, I think Sharon, you froze on me. Can you hear me? Oh, so we have Sharon that froze. Oh, there she is. She's came back, and it happens. And this is technology, and we gotta love it. So
yeah.
welcome back, Sharon. And it happens. We caught you mid sentence.
Yeah. So I went to the planning department. I spent 6 years in the planning department, and I was responsible for the enforcement. And one of the great opportunities about being promoted to the senior code enforcement officer in the planning division in Carson was it was a newly created position. And I remember when I was selected for the position, the city manager at the time said, Sharon, you're in a very unique position because you are going to be the first senior code enforcement officer in the city. And you're going to be in the planning department, and this is your opportunity to make that position what you want it to be. If you want it to be a high level administrative enforcement position, very professional, you have an opportunity to do that. You can transform it into what you want it to be. If you want it to be a uniform position and go out and do property inspections, you have the ability to transform it into what you want, because you're going to set the stage, and those that follow you will then follow what you establish. And I took that and created the position based on what I had desired to, number one, to give to the community and to get out of the position and out of the profession. And it was a great opportunity. And then,
So
I'm
So,
sorry.
Jeremy, we had a quick question, and this one came from Melvin, and he's asking if there's a code enforcement union, and there isn't a union, but there is different associations. And Sharon, people don't know this. A lot of times, people ask, "Hey, Sharon, why aren't you involved in the state union or state association?" But people don't realize that there's a lot of history where Sharon was a big integral part of combining both Northern and Southern California to create one association, and
Yeah.
people forget that. A lot of
Yeah.
times, I did my stint on the state union association for a number of years, and I've moved on since, and I still support because it's my state. But we all get busy, and it's a big commitment. So there is no union, but there's a lot of associations. There's the local, your state. There's local regional chapters. There's the national association, and there's the international code council, and they're all great resources. And I would really recommend for anybody to go to any of them. And also, now talking, let's go back to you. And I apologize, but we do
No.
get questions and
Yeah.
things like that. So one of the things is having that leadership opportunity to create something. It's a beautiful thing, but it always comes from somebody believing in you, and me knowing you. I've seen the changes that you've made to jurisdictions. It may not always be, when you go into a jurisdiction, so a lot of times people are like, well, that's the way it's always been done, or and so there's a shift, and you always have personnel issues that you have to deal with. But that's part of being a part of a supervisor. You have
Yeah.
to learn how to mesh well. So one of the things that you as a supervisor, what was the biggest transition from going from a field officer to a supervisor? And then the second part is, what was it that you really wanted to focus on when you had the opportunity to create your own program?
Yeah. The biggest transition going from an officer to a supervisor, as much as I thought I was prepared to do that, with the mentorship that I had received, and positioning myself to understand what it took to be a supervisor and the difference between a supervisor and an officer. One of the toughest transitions was promoting from within, and then being responsible to supervise those that I called my friends. And I think expectations and having unreasonable expectations was probably what made the transition, a little bumpy. And I learned a lot from that. Because I expected, and unreasonably, that because they were my friends, they were just going to automatically do everything that we knew we were supposed to be doing that we didn't always do. But now that Sharon's the supervisor, we're going to make sure that she's successful. And then on the other side, the expectation from those officers who were my friends was, oh, Sharon is the manager now, so Sharon knows what we do, so we're good. And so both sides had these unreasonable expectations, and so obviously what I wanted to do was come in and do a good job and help grow the operation, serve the community, and do it most effective and efficiently as possible. And that was my goal. And so there was, a tough transition. I'm happy to say that, we worked through it, and those friends are still friends now. Here we are, years later, and we're still very close. But it was really a tough transition, my first time around, and I wanted to make sure I didn't make that mistake again. And I set my expectations. Coming in, there's always this expectation that there's an opportunity for change when you get a new supervisor, and then they put the responsibility on the supervisor to kind of make changes in areas where the administration has previously believed there could be changes. And so you come in, and you don't want to just come in and totally be the change agent in an organization that have long-term employees, but you've been charged with doing that and figuring out that balance, developing the relationships with your staff, and then also ensuring that you deliver and meet the expectations of those that put you in that position is something that becomes very important to balance when you become a supervisor.
Now, when you got into to the city of Carson as a supervisor, did you hire anybody, or was that later down the road?
So yeah, when I became a supervisor, I had a full staff. In addition to code enforcement in Carson, I was also responsible for parking enforcement and for the security officers. The city has security officers, and they were under code enforcement. And so I eventually had to hire to replace my position since I was promoted from within. And then over the years, it's just been, I've hired and promoted, a lot of officers, those with experience and those that, didn't have as much experience, but we, could invest in them and develop them into great officers.
Now, being a seasoned manager now versus back then, do you see your hiring standards have changed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, back then, when, in my earlier days of management, it was really important uh, for me to get people who were already seasoned as well and can hit the ground running. So there's really no gap in the ability to deliver the service, because I wanted to deliver the service. It was really important. And then over time, I've learned to utilize my resources. Here in Santa Monica, I have 11 officers, a lead code enforcement officer, two code enforcement supervisors under me, and three admin staff. And one of those admin staff is also a supervisor. So I utilize my leadership team to evaluate, candidates, and not necessarily, and to meet where we are now in this time. We may not need, because we have a great team, we may not need the best of the group. We may look at fit or development, or different things now, and I utilize my team as we're evaluating that, and then to help me do that. And oftentimes it is, we need the best and the most seasoned at this time, because we don't have time to slow down to train. And then other times when the supervisors have the time to invest, then we will hire somebody who we see that we can develop. So I've come a long way with believing that we need to get seasoned officers in, so we can keep the continuity going and we can continue to deliver the service.
And one of the things, and following your career, I've seen you in different types of jurisdictions. For example, in city of Lakewood, when we were neighbors, everything went through a PIO, public information officer, versus somebody goes straight to you in
Yeah.
Santa Monica. So coming what has been an advantage or disadvantages of being able to transition from one type of community that may be very political or very conservative to a more liberal or more kind of lackadaisical environment? So
Yeah.
what do you see the difference in advantages and disadvantages as a manager?
For me, I think the advantage is that I had an opportunity to work for multiple jurisdictions, so I understood that things are different. Where you go, wherever you go, each city is different. It has its own uniqueness. Like you said, the city of Lakewood was like a bedroom community, but it's very structured. The city of Culver City, when I managed the enforcement services division and park enforcement there, it's a very different city on the west side. What's happening on the west side versus going east. And so the advantage is just the experience with different jurisdictions, and then also just networking with different people over the years to find out what folks are doing in all different types of jurisdictions. So you can take that into a city that's very unique, like Santa Monica, and very, very busy. And I'll tell you, even after, I think by when I came to Santa Monica, I'd already been in code enforcement, 20, 21 years. And I still experience things in Santa Monica that I had never encountered before, because of the uniqueness, of the city. And the advantage was having folks to call, still having, resources to call and talk things through with folks in order to, try to get it right most of the time.
And one of the reasons why we have this show is just the National Code Enforcement Network. And we see the city of Santa Monica in the news, or you see the city of Santa Ana in the news, or San Diego, and it's not just California, but Orlando, and Texas, states in Texas. So we see everything, and we love hearing from, I wouldn't say the horse's mouth, but we're from the source. Over the years, I've seen, city of Santa, and we're going to skip around back to Culver City and
Yeah.
Lakewood, but you know, um, you see the city of Santa Monica in the news sometimes. For example, you guys had some high profile cases with Airbnb or the scooters. I mean, scooters were just a fad, but they're still there, and some other cities are now dealing with it. So how do you deal with these new issues? Because even though they're not new issues, but you being in the media puts you at the forefront of enforcement. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with those?
So, I dealt with it from a mindset that, I wanted to make sure that we were able to spotlight just the code enforcement profession, number one, because, I think we are undervalued in a lot of ways. And so in September 2017, Bird Incorporated just came and dropped hundreds of scooters in the city of Santa Monica to launch their scooters, and we started getting calls about these things in the public right away, and we had never heard of it before. So we sent the officers out to find these things, and we didn't know anything about them. We didn't know how they work. We didn't have any regulations that address things like that. And the community, Santa Monica community, is very vocal. So we had really an even split of citizens in the community that loved it, and then we had those that hated it. And so there was a lot of pressure to address these things, but where do you land? And we had to do that quickly. And in Santa Monica, the city council and the city manager is very supportive of code enforcement. And so they look to me and to my division to figure out, how do we enforce this? What do we do? What do we have on the books? Because enforcement is number one. We don't just allow people to come and start to disrupt the community without going through the process or consequences. And that's the environment in Santa Monica. So we had to work really closely with our mobility division to come up with a pilot program to just kind of see how these things work in the community. And at the same time that we're creating a pilot program, I'm simultaneously creating an enforcement program, and engaging and contributing to what ultimately the rules and regs, were going to be. And now we just launched our second pilot program, and it worked pretty well. It was the first pilot program worked pretty well, and the second pilot program worked well. And they're here and they're moving in the city. We have 4 operators and it's going great, but it was definitely, so we had to do an evaluation immediately, come up with a solution immediately, enforce immediately, and then resolve the conflict. We had to do public education and so many things just kind of on the fly. And that's the type of environment that Santa Monica, brings. You just never know. And with short-term rental, like you said, it's been around for a long time. People rent rooms and things like that. But I think, the evolution of Airbnb just kind of changed what we knew it to be before, and having a platform that made it easy, to share, spaces. And so, Santa Monica has always been, the council priority is preserving affordable housing and rental housing units and long-term residency, because, in Santa Monica, we believe that long-term residents contribute, to the everyday government operation. Their voices are heard, and they participate in civic activities, and that's really important in Santa Monica. So when I came on board in 2015, the city had just adopted a short-term rental ordinance, although it had previously been enforced through the zoning code. They adopted an ordinance and moved all of the laws and regulations and clarified that it's prohibited in Santa Monica. So in case you don't know out there, to rent a home unhosted, just your whole home, your whole unit in Santa Monica, is against the law. You are allowed to share your home and rent as long as you live in your home and rent a room through Airbnb, HomeAway, and all of those things in Santa Monica. But to rent out through Airbnb or another platform, a whole unit in Santa Monica is illegal. And so in addition to clarifying that short-term rental was illegal in Santa Monica, the city invested in funding two full-time code enforcement officer positions and an admin position to support the short-term rental enforcement. And I directly oversee the short-term rental enforcement and the shared mobility enforcement. And we just, hit the ground running. I developed the enforcement program, and it was so successful. I guess you would say that we were sued. That was in the news. We were sued by Airbnb and HomeAway, and the city was successful all the way up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We were successful in defending the ordinance and the constitutionality of it. And that was just a really great experience, a process to be a part of. And ultimately, it resulted in a settlement between the city of Santa Monica and Airbnb and HomeAway that assists with our continued enforcement of illegal short-term rentals.
Yeah, so we have a question from Jose Roy. Does the city enforce any regulations against the hosting companies? And I know the city went after the platform for some time, but from my understanding, under the Section 290, which the Indecency Act, the companies tend to say, "Hey, we're not responsible for what people are doing." And I think that was part of the loss, if I'm not mistaken, with
Yeah.
City of Santa Monica.
Yeah, so because the hosting platforms are 100%, online services, the basis of the federal lawsuit was that they were protected by the Communications and Decency Act because they were an online platform, and we were subjecting them to enforcement and some pretty significant fines for violations. And so that is what was litigated, whether they were protected under the Communications and Decency Act or not. And the Ninth Circuit ruled in the city's favor that just because they are an online platform, it doesn't give them the right to violate local regulations. And so as a result of the settlement, we don't currently enforce against the platforms. But under the terms of the settlement agreement, the platforms provide information to the city that helps advance our enforcement. And so it was I think, probably a win-win situation where now the platforms are not subject to the enforcement and the significant fines that are associated with it. But we get information more readily on these monthly reports on activities that we then use to enforce against a host. That are having operating illegal short-term rentals.
And what's unique to the city of Santa Monica, and I'm sorry, I'm focusing on Santa Monica versus
It's okay.
focusing on you as the manager. It's like there's a lot of uniqueness to that city. Like I've never been in a beach city, so you have tons of beach regulations, whether it's vendors or street performers, or I mean, the your local instructor, your Tai Chi instructor, and
Yeah.
the public space. I mean, so how do you handle that, vendors, and and the amount of people? And one of the things that I hear a lot when we're doing these types of enforcement, hey, leave them alone. They're just trying to make a living. They're not selling drugs, and and how dangerous is that for your inspectors when they have to go out there and regulate some of these activities? And tell me a little bit about the activities as well that you see.
Yeah. So, the beach, the beach brings about its own unique challenges, and we're responsible for them all. So on the beach area, we enforce, like you said, the vendor regulations. We enforce the performers, fitness and surf instructors. I mean, we've literally had officers that have gotten on a speedboat with a harbor patrol and had to go and pluck an illegal surf instructor out of the water because they jumped in the water to avoid a citation. And we deal with pedicabs on the bike path and those things that are unique to the pier and beach environment. And with the passage of SB 946 in California, it exacerbated an already challenging situation. The beach in the area is just so wide. It's a challenging thing to travel by foot. it's a dangerous thing sometimes to travel by vehicle with so many folks on the beach. In Santa Monica, we have 90,000 residents in the city, but we receive over 400,000 visitors a day. And so there's a lot of activity, and most of those folks are going to the beach or they're going to the iconic Third Street Promenade to shop. And so, with the decriminalization of vending and the challenges that come with that, there is a misperception. There are some vendors down there that are selling drugs, but we do get a lot of resistance from the community for the very reasons that you said. They're just trying to make a living. They have a lot of children out there selling, and the interactions are not. They bring pretty significant conflict and risk to the officers in the interactions, not just in interactions with the vendors, but also with the public who is coming to the aid of the vendors. And we have vendors cooking on the pier with flames and using butane and other types of devices, and we have a wooden deck with thousands of people on there, and just a significant risk. So we don't have the luxury to say we're not going to address this huge concern on the beach and the pier and the trash and things that's generated. We have a responsibility, number one, to keep the area safe for our visitors, keep the waters in the area clean. And so, it's important to have a partnership with the police department and the fire department for emergency access and egress and ingress purposes. And so, it just brings about a lot of challenges that, we tackle every day.
And so your city is about 8 to 9 square miles, correct?
Yeah.
And hearing what you have to deal with, and I think you have like 12 officers, something to that effect. How do you handle dealing with the scooters, the Airbnb, the rental housing, the street performers, plus your general 101 code enforcement everyday tasks? I mean, you guys must be just busy.
We are busy, Pete. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we continue to invest and reinforce with the staff, how important they are, how much they're valued, because they have such, a heavy load, here in Santa Monica. And so ensuring that they know that they are appreciated, they are supported, and that they have an advocate in me that shields them from some of the challenges, to deal with the challenges personally, so that we can make sure that they remain motivated and committed to what we do. It's certainly not for the faint at heart here in Santa Monica, but we have to continue to make sure that we feed our staff so that they can go out and deal with these challenges. At the end of the day, I'm not in the field, I'm in the office, right? And I have to make sure that I don't lose sight of what their experiences are in the field, and make sure that they're equipped to deal with them and they get the breaks. I expect, obviously, for them to put in a productive day's work, but that doesn't mean working every minute of the day. They need that time to have those conversations with their coworkers and decompress. And we try to ensure that we create an environment in the office that when they come in from the challenges that they encounter in the field, that the pressure is not on for them. They don't have that added pressure. That we create an environment where they can decompress, and it's important for us to make sure that we do that. With tenant harassment and substandard housing, and making sure that landlords are not overcharging rent. And it's a lot. It's a lot for them. And I advocate for resources. I don't take on more than we can handle. So if in listening to my good friend Alvaro and his interview, we talked about taking stuff on, the good and the bad of doing well, right? So when you do well, people want to give you more. They want to give you more. Let code enforcement do it. They've done well. And, we appreciate that that we get that recognition that we do well, that they want to give us more. But it's my responsibility to make sure that we're not overloaded, because more comes with the need maybe to have more staff or to change priorities. And so it's my responsibility to make sure that I communicate that to the administration, that we can do, we can do things that you need, more things that you need us to do, but we either need more staff or we need to reprioritize what we do. And so usually that results in more staff. I will say that, with the support of the city council, we just got 4 new positions approved because of, the needs in the community. And so we've already, in the last month, hired 3 new code enforcement officers, and we're looking to fill the 4th position. So, and that's how I try to tackle, just the enormity of what we have, and the diversity of what we have to deal with in a city like Santa Monica.
And yeah, so you had a question: where can I get more information on landlords over charging for rent? So, City of Santa Monica has a rental cap, correct? So there's
Yes.
regulations for your city, but if you're in California, there's certain guides that are from the Department of Consumer Affairs. There's a handbook still floating out there that's still pretty relevant. You can get a free copy if you go to the California Department of Consumer Affairs. It's the Tenant Landlord Handbook. It talks about the rate increase in rent, what's allowable, what's not. Also, one thing that I did, I stole this from you, Sharon. You probably don't know this. You actually, you said that you never take on more than you can handle. And that really resonated because as new laws and ordinances come, who's going to do them? Code enforcement, whether it be mask enforcement, massage parlors, dispensaries, Airbnb. I mean, these are things that weren't around when you started in 1990 something,
You're 94, right?
Yeah, they weren't around, now they're prevalent, and one thing that I took from you, and I use it sometimes when I explain this to my city councils. I said, look, if you buy a nice big pickup truck, you can only load it so much before it becomes inefficient and it's not performing the way it's supposed to. You overload them. So what's the best solution? Get a second truck.
Right.
You need a second truck. You may need a second driver, a second supervisor.
Yeah.
You have to, there has to be a performance measure for us because, when I started in the city of Montebello, California, very political city. I had a supervisor. Well, she's a supervisor in another city now. But when I got her, she was like, "Pete, I have 1,700 cases. I'm drowning." I'm like, "You're not drowning, girl. You're the Titanic already
Already.
subsidizing at the bottom of the ocean."
Right.
So you're past drowning. So
Right.
we lessen her load, and we lessen her load, and we did we got rid of a lot of old stale cases for like that were 3 years old. Somebody complained about overgrown vegetation. It's 3 years old. I'm like, I'm not gonna do it. It's
Yeah.
past statute of limitations. You know what? Let's check it off. Let's lessen her load to make it more manageable. And one thing I tell officers is don't concentrate on your caseload. Concentrate on today's assignments. If you have 10 inspections today, work on those 10. Do the best you can for those 10. Don't worry about your 300, 400, 100 to 1,000 cases you have,
Yeah.
because it's just going to drive you nuts. It's unmanageable at that point. So you
Yeah.
can do the best you can. And if you need more resources, that's something that the manager yourself has to advocate for, has to go to bat for.
Yeah.
Maybe your director's like, oh, there's no budget. I always say there's always room. If you're that good, they'll find budget.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is one of the things I learned from you. You've been able to create programs and get things done. And I think that's why you're in the city of Santa Monica. We look at, the reason I invite people like you or Alvaro and others that we have scheduled is because we want folks that know what they're doing, been around the block, they've seen it all, and I love hearing from you. And I love the younger people that aspire to be the next Sharon Guidrys or the next Alvaros or the next Marcus Kellums to say, hey, you know what? That's the route they took. We don't talk about adversary a lot here, but sometimes you have to know the struggle, whether it's a city manager that didn't want to shake the boat or didn't want to tell council, because I sit through a lot of these. I go to the League of Cities and talk to city councils, and you hear two things: either code enforcement doesn't do anything,
Yeah.
or code enforcement harasses too much.
Too
You
much.
know,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it's just have to educate your council on what it is that we do, so they understand how much work they do. Once they get that, they realize, you know,
Yeah.
Sharon, you need more resources. That's why you
Yeah.
get 3 more
Yeah.
officers.
Yeah, yeah, the performance measures, Pete, is so important, right? And to tell you a little story, when I first came to Santa Monica, I was a month into, managing the operation, and one of my admin staff came to my office door and said, there's a Rick here to see you. And you don't just drop into the code enforcement office. It's, you have to know where it is. It's not open to the public. So, I said, Rick, I'm not expecting a Rick. And I said, Rick who? And and the staff said, Rick Cole. And I said, oh my God, like that's the city manager. Bring him in. I had city manager kind of waiting in bay to get into my office. And so Rick came into my office and he says, Sharon, I know you just, got here. I know you've only been here a month, but code enforcement is in chaos. And I want to know what your plan is for code enforcement. This was literally 30 days in, and this impromptu drop in from the city manager. And so I said, well, I can tell you, what my plan is. And I got up and I went to my whiteboard. Here I have a whiteboard wall, and I did, what my immediate assessment was in the 30 days coming in with 21 years of experience. I could immediately see some immediate tweaks that would make a huge difference. And some of those I had already started to implement, schedule changes and assignments and areas, and how we were deploying our resources. And so I did this whiteboard presentation for Rick with, where my, thought process was with delivering what I had already been told upon hire, was needed. And he left that office and said, left my office and he said, you got this. If you need any resources, if you need additional officers, let me know. I'll give you additional officers. I said, I won't come to you and ask you for more staff resources if I don't need them. But right now I can't tell you if I need them because I'm still evaluating. And once I determine that we have effective and the most efficient, processes, and that the staff is putting in a productive day's work, and then we still can't manage the caseload, that's when I'll come and tell you and ask you for, additional resources, because, I'm responsible. I don't just want folks sitting around to say, I have 20, I have 30 code enforcement officers. We have work we need to do, and we need to do that efficiently. And so being ready and knowing what we need to do, is so important. And when you talk about, kind of the journey, I could not have written my script and placed myself in this seat, 30 years ago, as a I was parentless at 15. I lost my parents at 15. I've been on my own since I was 15. And then had two children pretty young, and a single mom. And, I just wanted to be able to survive and provide some kind of stability. But some really special people saw something in me and invested in me, and in order to help me achieve, my goals. And I didn't know at the time really what they are. They kept evolving over time. And as I grew and loved this profession, wanted to have a significant impact, when I finally decided to lay up my hat and my badge, and what my legacy is that Sharon contributed, something great to the profession, and she contributed to the people, and helped to lay a pathway for other people to come into the profession and to grow and develop where they may not have ever thought about, code enforcement. And so, it's really important for me to pay it forward and give back, and look at and listen to my staff, and what they want to do and what they want to accomplish, and make sure that I help that happen.
And one of the reasons why we put this together was, there's not a lot of people that have mentors, even when their own department. I've been in cities where I didn't have anybody, so I had to kind of just go at it myself. I've had great mentors, and I had great role models, and that's one of the reasons why, you were part of the first ever women leaders in code enforcement discussion. It's there's not that many folks that contribute as much as the participants of that program. I mean, that program was off the hook. I'm a guy, and I was like, I was gaslit, and it's crazy that there's a lot, and hearing in the conversations we sat in those rooms, and you hear people saying that they didn't have a role model, and thanking everybody on those panels for giving them inspiration. You're one of them, and sitting here, I've known you for years, and you sat on the first ever code enforcement manager a roundtable when we did it at the conference years ago. And I
Yeah,
remember, we are sitting there, and I had the all stars of code enforcement, which is funny because when I got hired for the city of Garden Grove, it's the same people that were on my panel,
right.
and it, it's a great feeling to be among, people, like-minded individuals that really care about the profession and moving the profession forward. Because us, as I would say, we're seasoned enough where we get to include people in our profession.
Yeah,
We look at new people coming in and say, do I want this person to be part of my team? Do
yeah,
I want to invest in this person? And you get to mold these people to be well-rounded individuals, because the best thing that you do as a supervisor or manager, I've gone to different jurisdictions where I started volunteer programs, like everybody got hired somewhere or another place.
yeah,
And it makes me feel good, just like my children graduating school. It's just a good feeling. Or officer that was struggling becomes a supervisor,
yeah,
and you have the same experiences where you had superstars that moved on and just became better than they when you found them, and you
yeah,
contributed that. And I
yeah,
think having that mentality, and having the and of course we get those folks that we struggle with them, and sometimes the pathway of success wasn't with you, but they had to find elsewhere, and
yeah,
sometimes they find it. And I learned a lot from a supervisor that I didn't particularly get along with. So I
yeah.
learned two things: one, how not to be like that, and
That's
how not to make my employees feel like that. And
yeah,
second, I learned that how did that person get there? I mean, they got there a certain way, whether it's because they were just rock stars in their own world, or they had the ability to execute and use their staff efficiently in order to promote. And you look at these things, and now you're in a position, like I would say, your staff, you have good staff, you got a good lineup. I will give
great
you that.
stuff.
I look at,
Great stuff.
like
I am
Alvaro was
so
saying.
fortunate. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
well, it's not, it's what, like Alvaro said, you have the Red Sox, he has the Yankees, because what they pay well.
Yeah,
But it's expected that you're hiring all stars and people that come in with a wealth of experience. And even if they didn't have experience, you saw something in them with your you being seasoned. You're like, that's what I'm looking for. That's
yeah,
the fit for this community. They might not be a fit for Lakewood, but they're a fit for here.
yeah.
You know,
It's so important. I think, I've been really fortunate to be able to develop code enforcement programs, in multiple cities from scratch, and also transforming, code enforcement programs. But when I look at where my greatest accomplishments are, it's in the people that I've been able to work with and contribute to their growth and their development and them achieving their goals. And I can create a program in my sleep, but the investment and the time in people is what it really is the most rewarding, and it helps to best serve the community who wakes up every day and expects something from us, and investing in the people that's going to deliver. And try and meet those expectations is so important. And of all the things I've been fortunate to do, in my 26 years in code enforcement, it is investing in the people and seeing them in management positions now, code enforcement managers, code enforcement supervisors, building permit supervisors. I mean, just all across is what I just enjoy the most.
And and it's funny that you say you can create a program in your sleep, because when you see effective code supervisors and managers, you see some are very program oriented, creating programs.
Hmm.
you know um it's not an easy thing.
Hmm.
Some people can create programs, but they can't execute. Some people
Right.
are great executors, but they can't create a program. Other
Right.
ones are great at putting people together, and other people are great to, like, the thing that I learned a long time ago. When they asked me what's my management style, I said, look, I'm a baseball coach. I'm like Tommy Lasorda. You know what? I have a first baseman, second base, third base. Not everybody can be your shortstop.
That's right.
And
That's
you
right.
have to basically, practice with them differently. Like a pitcher is going to practice his swing, I mean his arm, where a shortstop's going to do a lot of
Yeah.
the what do you call
Yeah.
it, sweep up
They're
on the
all
ball.
different.
So
Yeah, they're all
and
different. They all have different needs. And I say all the time that, we are all a piece to the puzzle. And it takes the whole, every piece put together in order to do what we do. And no piece is more important than the other. I may be the manager, and only difference between me and my staff is that they pay me a little bit more. But they are equally as important, because what their job is important to the whole and to the whole picture. And when one thing is missing, you're looking, and the first thing you notice is that there's a missing piece. And so, from the admin staff that processes our invoices and orders supplies, to the call center folks who take those 5, 10,000 calls a year, from the community wanting something, to the officers that are going to go out and do the investigation, and then to me, who's going to help develop the ordinances and communicate with the city manager and the city council. We are all equally important to the whole.
you know, and so we're coming up on our hour. Isn't that crazy? It seems like, we thought we didn't have enough material here. So
I always
but
love talking to you, so it's easy.
no, and you know what? These are candid. It's we I love, just hearing your stories so other people can be inspired. And some folks may be the next Sharon Gidry. They want to sit in your spot, and you know what? Your spot it wasn't just handed to you. You earned it.
It was
And
not ended.
and it's 20 some plus years of experience. And that's, you learn a lot. You have a lot of experience coming in from different jurisdictions, dealing with different types of employees. And like you said, like you just, I like to sum things up. You want to build a pepperoni pizza, can't do it without the cheese.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, you
yeah,
could if you're lactose intolerant, you find substitutes, but it's not the
yeah.
same.
Yeah. When
But
I came in young and a female in a male dominated profession and trying to grow in the profession, it was tough. But we are so diverse now. And I think it's just such a wonderful thing to see and be a part of, because we're serving diverse communities. And it's important for us to have diverse staff. And so, yeah, there's been a remarkable change over the years. And it's a great time for folks to get involved and continue to grow in the profession. And I'm just excited about what we see happening.
and I love it, and thank you for empowering the next generation of women. And it's funny because I never really looked at you as a code enforcement female. I just looked at you as a code enforcement person. But just like myself, I never really thought of myself as a Latino code enforcement. But I need to use that and empower other you know people that say, hey, you know what, we need folks like us. We need the women in code enforcement to empower other women to say, hey, we together we can do something great.
Great.
And we think so differently. But other than that, we do have. I'm going to do a shameless plug. We have what do you call it? A training this Thursday. It's an officer safety training. It's more focused on the what to do so you don't get into a jam. and then have to fight your way out of it. It's like being able to be awareness. If you get into a situation, the pre-awareness assessment before you actually get yourself in trouble, and how you can what steps you can do to identify these. It's going to be this Thursday. I'll send you. You know what? I'll send you a comp.
Yeah,
And
please.
send you a comp. Check it out. It's
Yes.
we use the same platform that we did the women in leadership. So we have Gary Whiteson, who's been on Dr. Oz. He talks about autism awareness and protocols. We have Kevin Hurst. He's a national speaker. Talks about animal safety, animal control signs, and then we have the Federal Bureau of Investigations talking about human trafficking. So I mean, we have a great lineup, and
Oh,
it's gonna
yeah.
be six hours, and so I'll send you something and
Yes,
I really
please do.
appreciate you being
Yeah,
on here today. I love it.
thank you for having me.
Listen for this on podcast. It's going to be on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. So after this, so thank you. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time, and as always, it's always a pleasure seeing you. And I will see you. And either if I don't see you at the ACE conference, I'll see you at the KCO conference or
Yes.
at ICC. I'll see you somewhere though.
We'll see you somewhere. Yes. Thank you, Pete. Take
All
care.
right. Thank you, everybody. And thank everybody for tuning in. And let me see. Real quick question. So, you had any type of templates for SOPs? If you want to email me, you can definitely email me. I'm going to put my email right here. I have a template for SOP. Anybody needs it, let me see. You can, or leave it. I'm going to put in my email and. Ooh, So this is my email. You can definitely email me. I'll send you a template. We had a question. Any thoughts on virtual code enforcement employment? That was something new that came out of COVID. There is a place for it, in my opinion, but a lot of times you do need to go out and verify certain things. Let me see. Somebody said that you are an American role model, Sharon. Look at
Oh,
that.
thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Lemus, and Mr. Jose said thank you, and we really appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time, um, within next month. All right, thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.